Who doesn't remember ALF, the cat-eating alien who may or may not have been on my lunchbox? It was one of the biggest shows of the late 80s, but while we were all watching and enjoying, on the flip side of the TV, it was an absolute nightmare. The cast hated it, the creator was maniacal, child actors worked brutal hours, and the show ended on one of the cruelest cliffhangers in television history, leaving an entire generation of kids traumatized. Today, I'm diving into the rise, the chaos, and the bizarre fall of ALF, one of the most surprisingly toxic productions in television history. Before we start, give this video a quick like if you watched ALF back in the day, and subscribe for more retro TV deep dives. Okay, let's go all the way back to 1986. The Cosby Show was the #1 show in America. Family Ties, Growing Pains, Night Court, every network had a family-friendly sitcom, but none of them had a puppet alien. Enter Paul Fusco, a puppeteer and voice actor who'd been working in television for years. He'd done Muppet-style work, created characters for various shows, but he'd never had his own hit. He had this character he'd been developing, a furry, wisecracking alien named ALF. The name stood for Alien Lifeform, which, let's be honest, is pretty on the nose. Speaking of noses, ALF had a big one, and it matched his personality. He was obnoxious, sarcastic, rude, and obsessed with eating cats. Not exactly family-friendly on paper. Fusco teamed up with Tom Patchett, a writer and producer, and they developed a pitch. What if this alien crash-landed in the garage of a normal suburban family? And what if, instead of being cute and cuddly like E.T., he was basically the worst house guest imaginable? They pitched it to NBC, and somehow, against all odds, NBC said yes. Now, you've got to remember, in '86, puppets on primetime television weren't exactly a thing. Jim Henson had done it with The Muppet Show, but that was variety, not a sitcom. A half-hour family sitcom built entirely around a puppet character? That had never been done successfully in prime time. But NBC was willing to take the risk. They greenlit the show and production began. They cast Max Wright, a respected theater actor, as Willie Tanner, the dad, Anne Shadeen as Kate, the mom, Andrea Elson as teenage daughter Lynn, and Benji Gregory as young son Brian, a normal, wholesome American family. And of course, they had ALF. ALF premiered September 22nd, 1986. The first episode shows the Tanner family going about their normal lives when suddenly, crash, a spaceship destroys their garage. Out crawls this weird-looking alien who immediately starts making jokes, insulting everyone, and trying to eat their cat, Lucky. America fell in love instantly. The ratings were huge. The show debuted strong and kept climbing. By the end of season 1, ALF was a top 10 show. By season 2, it was regularly pulling 20 to 30 million viewers per episode. Kids were obsessed. ALF merchandise was everywhere. Lunchboxes, toys, Halloween costumes, trading cards. Paul Fusco voiced an ALF animated series that ran on Saturday mornings. ALF was even guest hosting The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. He was a genuine A-list celebrity. ALF may have crash-landed on Earth, but his appeal was universal. Parents loved it because it was family-friendly but actually funny. Kids loved it because ALF was hilarious and chaotic. Everyone had a favorite ALF moment. The show won multiple awards. Paul Fusco became a household name. On the outside, ALF looked like a massive success story, the feel-good hit of the decade. But what people didn't realize was, it was hell. Here's the thing about ALF that most people don't realize. It was one of the most technically difficult shows ever produced. See, ALF wasn't CGI. He wasn't a costume. He was a puppet operated by Paul Fusco, who was either crouched below the set or in a pit beneath it, which meant the entire set had to be built on a massive 4-foot-high platform with trap doors cut everywhere so Fusco could move around and operate ALF from below. The actors, as a result, had to hit their marks perfectly, not just for camera angles, but because if they stood in the wrong spot, they'd be blocking Fusco's access to the puppet. If someone missed their mark, the whole scene had to be reshot, and Paul Fusco was a perfectionist. Multiple cast members have talked about how he would demand take after take after take. If Alf's head turned at the wrong angle, reshoot. If the puppet's mouth didn't sync perfectly with the dialogue, reshoot. If Fusco didn't like his own vocal performance, reshoot. Andrea Elson, who played Lynn, said in interviews that shooting days regularly went 16 to 18 hours. Most sitcoms shoot an episode in a few days with 8 to 10 hour days. ALF episodes took a week or more. And here's the kicker. Fusco wasn't just the puppeteer and the voice, he was also a producer, which meant he had creative control over the show. He could override directors, he could demand changes, he could make the cast do scenes over and over until he was satisfied. Judge, jury, executioner. And Max Wright, who played the dad, absolutely hated it. Wright was a serious stage actor. He'd done Shakespeare, he'd done Broadway. He took his craft seriously. And now he was crawling around on a sitcom set waiting for a guy under the floor to get a puppet right, doing 40 takes of the same scene. Multiple sources, including cast members and crew, have said that Wright started drinking on set to cope. He reportedly called ALF the worst experience of his professional life. In later interviews, he refused to talk about the show. When he did mention it, he was dismissive, almost bitter. And Shadeen, who played the mom, was more diplomatic in interviews, but she also made it clear that working on ALF was incredibly difficult. But it was perhaps hardest on the kids. Andrea Elson and Benji Gregory were teenagers and preteens during the show's run. They were working those brutal 18-hour days. Child labor laws required them to have tutors and schooling on set, which only added to the chaos. Both have talked in later years about how grueling it was. Benji Gregory said the show basically consumed his childhood. He'd go to school on set, work all day, go home exhausted, then do it all over again the next day. And it was also emotionally exhausting. Multiple crew members have said there were screaming matches on set, walk-offs, tensions got so high that people stopped talking to each other between takes. The show that looked so fun and wholesome on screen, behind the scenes, it was a pressure cooker ready to explode. And the crazy thing is, it still managed to work. The show stayed successful. The ratings were good. NBC kept renewing it. From the network's perspective, why fix what wasn't broken? But by season 3, cracks were starting to show. The ratings were still solid, but they were declining. Season 1 had been a massive hit, season 2 had maintained that success, but by season 3, viewership was starting to slip. The ratings continued to drop in season 4, and partway through the season, NBC had all but decided to cancel ALF. But Paul Fusco wasn't having it. He begged NBC for one more season, just one more. Let us end the show properly. Let us give the fans closure. NBC gave him a verbal agreement. They would do a season 5, but with conditions. It would be shortened to wrap up the story. Relieved, Fusco and the writers began planning. They decided to write a massive cliffhanger for the end of season 4 to lead directly into that final shortened run. But here's where things got really complicated and ultimately created one of the cruelest and most bizarre legacies for a TV show ever. After the finale was filmed, NBC executives changed their minds. They reneged on the verbal deal. Fusco pushed back. He argued that they'd promised him a final season, that fans deserved an ending, and also that they owed it to everyone involved to finish what they'd started. NBC waffled. They'd air the remaining episodes, but they wouldn't commit to anything beyond that. And so, the cast and crew limped toward the season 4 finish line, not knowing if each episode would be their last. And then came March 24th, 1990. The episode was called Consider Me Gone. It was supposed to be the season 4 finale, a cliffhanger that would set up stories for the shortened 5th season. The plot went like this. Alf's people, the Melmacians, have finally found him. They're coming to Earth to rescue him and take him home. Throughout the episode, Alf wrestles with the decision. Should he stay with the Tanners, the family that took him in and became his home? Or should he go with his own people and finally escape Earth? It's emotional, the Tanners are crying, Alf is torn. It's actually a pretty touching episode for a show that's usually all jokes. In the final scene, Alf decides to leave. He says goodbye to the family. They're all hugging, crying, telling each other that they love each other. Alf heads out to the middle of a field where the spaceship is supposed to pick him up. The Tanners watch from a distance. The spaceship appears, Alf is about to board, and then military vehicles surround him. The Alien Task Force, a secret government organization that's been hunting Alf throughout the series, has finally caught him. Alf is captured. The Tanners scream his name, but they're too far away. They watch helplessly as the military loads Alf into a van and drives away. The camera focuses on Alf's terrified face in the back of the van. Fade to black. End of episode. Except, it wasn't the end of the episode. It ended up being the end of the series. NBC canceled Alf. No warning, no announcement during the episode. Kids and families across America watched that ending thinking, okay, what happens next season? And then there was no next season. An entire generation of children, millions of them, went to bed that night thinking their favorite alien friend had been captured by the government and was probably being experimented on in some secret lab. Parents were furious. NBC was flooded with angry letters and phone calls. How could you end a kids show like that? My children are traumatized. But NBC had made their decision. Alf was done. For Paul Fusco, it was devastating. He'd built this character, this show, this world, and it was ending on the worst possible note, a cliffhanger that made it look like Alf would be a government prisoner for life, or worse. He immediately started trying to fix it. For 6 years, Paul Fusco lobbied NBC, other networks, anyone who would listen. Let me make a TV movie. Let me finish the story. Let me give Alf a proper ending. And finally, in 1996, 6 years later, NBC agreed. Project Alf aired as a TV movie on February 17th, 1996. The plot: Alf is being held in a secret military base, but two scientists who work there realize he's harmless and they help him escape. They go on the run together while the military hunts them down. Eventually, the President of the United States intervenes, declares Alf a protected refugee, and he's allowed to live freely. It was meant to give closure, to show that Alf survived, that he wasn't tortured or killed, that everything was okay. But here's the problem. It was terrible. The script was bad, the acting was worse, none of the original cast appeared. No Max Wright, no Anne Shadeen, no kids. It felt cheap, rushed, and desperate. And barely anyone watched it. By 1996, Alf had been off the air for 6 years. The kids who loved it were teenagers now. The cultural moment had passed. Project Alf got mediocre ratings and was quickly forgotten. For the cast, life after Alf was complicated. Max Wright continued acting in theater and occasional TV roles, but he never found another major hit. He struggled with addiction and health issues. He passed away in 2019 at the age of 75. In his obituaries, Alf was mentioned prominently, but Wright had spent 30 years trying to be known for anything else. And Shadeen mostly retired from acting after Alf. She did a few guest spots here and there, but she stepped away from Hollywood. Andrea Elson continued acting for a while, but eventually left the industry. She's spoken more positively about Alf than some of her co-stars, but she's also been honest about how difficult the production was. Benji Gregory, who played Little Brian, struggled after the show ended. He joined the Navy, dealt with personal challenges, and sadly, he passed away suddenly in 2024 from heat stroke. And Paul Fusco, well, he never stopped trying to bring Alf back. In 2000, he pitched an Alf revival series. Networks passed. In 2012, he tried again. Nothing. In 2018, Warner Brothers announced they were developing an Alf movie reboot with Sony Pictures Animation. There was a screenwriter attached. Fusco was involved. The movie still hasn't been made, and you know what? It probably won't be. The truth is, Alf's reputation as a nightmare production has followed it for decades. Cast members who are still alive rarely talk about it fondly. Crew members have shared horror stories, and the abrupt, traumatic ending has become part of the show's legacy. Now, did showrunners learn from the disaster of Alf? Well, eventually, but not before they made the same mistake one more time. In 1991, just a year after Alf was dragged away by the government, Jim Henson's Creature Shop launched Dinosaurs, and it was arguably the only show that was harder to make than Alf. It was the same story: massive technical challenges, huge budgets, and frustrated actors trapped in rubber suits. And just like Alf, it traumatized a generation of kids with its finale. Alf gave us government captivity. Dinosaurs, however, gave us the literal apocalypse and the extinction of the main cast. Between the two of them, they effectively killed the genre. The industry realized that practical effects sitcoms were just too heavy a lift. By the mid-90s, networks relied on easier shows like Friends, where the only technical challenge was Jennifer Aniston's hair. ALF remains a relic of a time when TV was willing to try the impossible, even if it meant making the cast miserable and ultimately children cry. If you enjoyed this deep dive, give the video a quick like and subscribe for more. Thanks for watching.